it's been a fashion lately to continue blaming Islam and accusing Islam and Muslims in general of being terrorists. A congressional candidate in North Carolina who put an ad because she is desperate. But we decided to show you her commercial that she put on television comparing Islam and Muslims to terrorism and the terrorists. Now, even though there is no investigation to actually prove that Muslims even did that horrific act on 9/11, and even if it is proven that they were and they planned it and they executed it, even though, remember, there is no investigation of 9/11 that had taken place. Everything you see in the news, everything you see on the ground, million Iraqis dead, hundreds of thousands of Afghanis, or probably in the millions, dead, all because of 9/11. Because the United States foreign policy has been driven by the events that took place on 9/11. The whole world had been affected by those events on 9/11. But yet, we find these congressional candidates who cannot win in the polls, cannot win on issues, they want to create issues. Doesn't matter what happens to American Muslims when they incite violence against them because of ads like this.
Back in the book segment tonight, did you see that? We begin this evening with a political ad put out by Republican Renee Ellmers, who's running for Congress against Bob Etheridge in North Carolina. Roll the tape.
After the Muslims conquered Jerusalem and Cordoba and Constantinople, they built victory mosques. And now they want to build a mosque by ground zero. Where does Bob Etheridge stand? He won't say, won't speak out, won't take a stand.
The terrorists haven't won, and we should tell them in plain English, no, there will never be a mosque at ground zero.
She said that Muslims, whenever they conquered new ground, they built victory mosques. And she mentioned when they conquered Jerusalem. Of course, she is counting on you not knowing facts of history and facts of exactly what happened. Because when the Muslims conquered Jerusalem, ladies and gentlemen, they did not build a victory mosque. Umar ibn Khattab, who was the second man who became the leader of the Muslims after the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, died and was in Jerusalem, on that day, it was time for prayers. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre was right there. Muslims, his companions, the people around him, they suggested that let's go and pray at the church. He said no. You know why he said no? It's not because he does not want to pray at the church, because Muslims do consider churches as a place of worship, places to worship God. So apparently Muslims have been praying at churches because they consider them a house of worship. Otherwise, they would not have asked the leader of the Muslims at that time, Umar ibn Khattab, to actually go and pray there. He said no. He said he was afraid that if he goes and prays in that church, that the Muslims after him will convert it into a mosque and it would become a mosque. Instead, he went, and by the way, now if you do visit Jerusalem and if you go and visit the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, while you are standing in front of the church, just look ahead of you. You will see a mosque there. And that mosque named Masjid Omar, or the Mosque of Omar. named after the second Khalifa of the Muslims. Now we learn two things from this. That number one, Muslims look at places of worship, such as churches, as places of God. That's why they asked him, let's go and pray at that church. Number two, they care about those churches because he was afraid that if he went and prayed at that church, that the Muslims will convert it. And she shows you in the ad a picture of the Dome of the Rock that was built like, I don't know, maybe 70 years after the fact. Don't quote me on that historical, on that number. But it was built way after, and it was not no Victory Mosque. But she wants to get into that seat. Doesn't matter how she gets there, even if she has to step over Muslim bodies from North Carolina to Washington, she's willing to do it. That's the craziness about what happened on 9/11. Because until now, the Muslims are still paying for what happened on that day on 9/11. How come Catholics are not paying for Timothy McVeigh, for the Oklahoma City bomber? He was Catholic. He was religious. And they said that him and Terry Nichol, because of their belief in God, that's why they did what they did. Is the Catholic religion a violence religion? Shall we say that all Catholics are terrorists? Because Timothy McVeigh was. What about Hitler? Shall we say that Catholics, he was a Catholic? Shall we say that because of his Catholic upbringing that he did what he did? Well, let's get into the Muslims and 9/11. Now, let me tell you before we go there. Number one, there's not a proof, not one shred of evidence that Muslims did 9/11. None. Even Thomas Keane and Lee Hamilton, the chairman of the 9/11 Commission report, said they do not have any evidence to accuse neither bin Laden nor Al-Qaeda. They don't have solid evidence. And they wrote that in a book afterwards. You're going to tell me, well, bin Laden was on TV and he claimed that they did it. I'm going to tell you that the only interview after 9/11 with bin Laden took place right after 9/11, and he denied Al-Qaeda having anything to do with it. That was the end and the last we've seen the real bin Laden. The interview that came up afterwards, even the head of the Pakistani intelligence services, which he was close to bin Laden, he'd seen bin Laden, he had many meetings with bin Laden. When the CIA got that interview with the fake bin Laden, who claims responsibility for 9/11, the chief of the Pakistani intelligence services said that was not bin Laden. There's two things that we're going to accomplish tonight. Number one, there's a huge question about Muslims and 9/11. And don't forget that Muslims died on that day. I've counted about 23 of them, and we have a picture to show some of them, I think about 12 of them. Those people died in the towers. Those are Muslims, Muslim Americans. I'll tell you where this thing is going unless we stop it. This thing is going to end up in the persecution of Muslims in the United States. Just like what happened to Jews in Europe. Just like what happened to Catholics. Just like what happened to Protestants. Just like what happens to any religion of the minority. These people are using these tactics so they can get to Washington, regardless if it takes hundreds of thousands of Muslims in the United States years down the road when everybody hates them. if it takes to wipe these people off the face of the earth, a Holocaust, a real one this time. The whole world knows the truth, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. You're the only one left on the face of the earth here in the United States who don't believe in the real story of 9/11.